Hi, hello, and welcome everyone. Welcome to this video series on Sessions Manager. In our previous video, we saw how to enable Sessions Manager for a public EC2 instance, and in this session, we are going to see how to enable the Sessions Manager access for a private EC2 instance running in a private subnet. The steps are a little different. Some additional steps are required to enable the Sessions Manager access for a private EC2 instance, which we'll see in today's video. But before we get on with it, let's see what we covered in our previous video. For those who have not seen our earlier video, I'll provide the link in the description or in the video above. So please follow that video. So in our previous video, we had a quick introduction to Sessions Manager. So we saw that Sessions Manager is a part or a component of AWS Systems Manager, and you use this Sessions Manager to manage your instance through a browser-based shell or via AWS CLI. We discussed around the use cases. Then we had a lab session where we created an instance profile, a role with the policies required to enable the sessions manager access. And in our next step, we attached that role to the public EC2 instance, and that enabled the session manager access for the instance that we were running. In today's video, we are going to see what additional steps are required to enable SSM for a private instance. So before getting on with these steps, we will launch a EC2 instance in a private subnet, and then we will create, because we have already created a role, so we'll skip the step number 2 here, that is creating the IAM role, and we'll just use this role to attach it to the instance, and then we'll follow with the other steps required, additional steps required for enabling the SSM manager on a private instance. But before we move forward, let's jump on to the console and see, with the already running private instance with the role attached, whether the steps suffices to enable the SSM manager access on a private EC2 instance. So as you can see here, this is the role that we created in our previous video with the policy. And then we will jump to the console, and you can see here in the console that I already have a private instance running here. So before going on to this private instance, let me show you what we did in our last video. So we launched a public instance, and to this instance, you could see that there was public IP already assigned, and then on this security, you can see that the IAM role, we attached this role on this EC2 instance, and what it led to was that if I go select this instance and I click on connect on the sessions manager, you could see that this connect option getting enabled initially from grayed out state to connect, and I could connect to my EC2 instance from my browser. So basically it opens a SSH cell access into the EC2 instance. So this is taking some time to load. And as you can see here, the SSH access is enabled here, ls-l. And you can soon see here that I am able to access my instance. Now let's switch back to the EC2 console, and let's have a quick look at the description of this private instance that I have launched. So let's select this instance, and you could see that in role I have already attached this role to my private instance. If you go to networking, you could see that there are no public IP addresses here, so then this is running in a private subnet. So this is a purely a private instance which is not accessible to outside world. And let's see whether by just attaching the instance manager role, whether I am able to have the SSM manager enabled for this instance. As you can see here that for this instance, the sessions manager is not getting enabled. We are not getting the connect option. So let's move back to the slide and see what additional steps are required here to enable this access. So we have almost done the first three steps in our previous video, and we have done this part. So now what we'll have to do is that we'll have to have the VPC ID and the subnet ID handy, and then we'll go into our VPC section and we'll create three endpoints uh, with SSM, EC2 message, and SSM message service names, and that would be required to enable the SSM manager for the private instance. Let's jump back to our EC2 console. So we already have a private EC2 instance running and the role already attached. So now we are going to just follow with the additional steps, which is around creating the endpoints. So on your VPC, you could see that I have a tech hub, and on in my instance description, if you look, I have this instance running in my tech hub subnet, sorry, tech hub VPC, and the subnet is 1F. So this is the subnet ID I could directly go to. So you could see that the alias is US East 1F. So this reference we just need to remember. We go to the VPC section and we go to endpoints. And in endpoint, just click on create endpoint. And for the very first endpoint, let me use this alias. And leave it to AWS services, and in services we'll just check for SSM, and we need it for the US East one because that's where my VPC is running right now. We'll select the SSM service name and scroll down, and in the VPC section we need to select the VPC where our private instance is running, and in the subnet section just enable uh, just select the subnet where and the subnet ID where your instance is launched. So for me it was is 1F, so that is what I would select in my subnet options. In the security group, just need to remember that whichever security group you use, you have the HTTP access enabled under that security group in the inbound rules. So for this security group, I have the inbound rule enabled for HTTPS. So leave the rest of the section as is and create this endpoint. And then what we have to do is we have to again follow the same steps for the other two endpoints, which is EC2 messages and SSM messages. So let me create the aliases again. And in my service name EC2. So I have here EC2 messages, VPC selected here, and subnet selected, and the security group selected here, and we just go about creating the endpoint. And again we go to create endpoint, and this time it is the SSM messages. So SSM messages, select the service name, select the VPC, select the subnet, select the security group, and that is all that we require. So we have created all the three endpoints, and that is all that we require to. So once these three endpoints are up and running, we can check for the SSM or the sessions manager access on the private EC2 instance. I'll pause the video for now and I'll come back. Now let's open up AWS Systems Manager. So let's open up System Manager in a new tab. Now you could see that all the three instances to which we have attached the role that we created, all those three instances are visible here. So out of those three instances, the private instance that we are working with right now is the very first instance here. As if we go back to the EC2 console to check, we can see that the private instance ID ends with CAA. So this is our instance. So now if you want to launch the SSH terminal from Fleet Manager, you could just select this instance, go to Node Action, and you can start the terminal from here. So that is one way of launching your SSH terminal. On the other hand, if you want to go directly from AWS console, you could go back to your EC2 console. You could select the private instance. Remember, earlier when we tried this option, the sessions manager was not getting enabled, and now you could see that the sessions manager is getting enabled. And for that, what we did is we created the three endpoints that I showed you. So those endpoints, in case of a private instance, the VPC endpoints are required by the systems manager to access the instances and exchange the logs with the instance, and hence in return enable the sessions manager for a private instance. So please do remember, this is the difference between enabling the sessions manager for a private EC2 instance. So now moving back to our slides. So we have completed all these steps, and as a result of these steps, we have the sessions manager enabled for private instance. Suppose you are working with very old version of instances, or for some reason your SSM manager is not getting enabled in spite of you following all these steps. You can use these commands to check your agent version, or if the agent is missing on your EC2 instance, you could install the agent, or you could check whether the agent is in a stop state. You could check the status with this command. Similarly, for the Windows instance, you could use a start or restart agent from the PowerShell. Now, coming back to our original agenda, there was one section wherein we said that we would be discussing about alternate methods for SSH access to EC2 instance in addition to the sessions manager option. So one option that we have is the EC2 instance connect option, but the requirement for this option is that this option requires a public IP address attached to the instance that you are running. And then the next option is the EC2 serial console, but remember that this option you could enable only for those instances which run on the AWS Nitro system. So instances such as the instances belonging to the T3 instance type. So there is a complete description of the instance types that are supported by the Nitro system. So you could see T3 to start at a minimum, and then T4G. So these references you can take, like what instance types are supported under Nitro. So if I go back to the EC2 instance, EC2 console. So if I have a public facing instance, and if I go to the connect option, and if I click on EC2 instance connect, so we have already seen session manager as one type of connectivity option. The other type is instance connect. So as said, it requires a public IP to be enabled. If you do not have a public IP, you will not get this option enabled. So you could use the connect option to connect to the terminal and SSH into your EC2 instance. So here we are. And now coming back to the private instance, if you look at this instance, stay some time. If I click on connect option, you would see that here it says the instance does not have a public IPv4. So this is what I was talking about. So for private instances, you could go in via the sessions manager directly. And if you have this option enabled, you don't require to even enable your SSH ports in the inbound rule in the security group as well. And this totally removes the requirement of either having the SSH ports enabled, inbound rules enabled for SSH, or a bastion host. So your instance is completely secure, and if you have this enabled, you don't need to bother about anything for SSH access. And it is one of the security best practice when it comes to accessing your instance. So the third option is a EC2 serial console, and again, as you see here, it says it can only be enabled for a AWS Nitro system. So let's go back. I have a AWS Nitro system for demo purpose, so I have launched this. This is running a T3 instance type. So this is T3 Micro, which is belonging to the Nitro family of the instances. And when I click on connect, you can see that the EC2 serial console is enabled, and I could use the connect option to go into the terminal directly. So having said that, these are the various options with which you can log into your EC2 instances from your browser-based consoles without having to worry about configuring a bastion host, or for that matter, configuring your local SSH agent to access your instances. So I hope you found the video useful. Do remember to like and subscribe the video. See you in next video. Thank you, everyone.